If you have a goal to retire and start living your best life, there's nothing worse than having enough money to retire, but then standing in your own way. And this is a trend I see from a material amount of retirees. They have false beliefs about retirement that are effectively keeping them from actually retiring. In this video today, I want to talk about 6 common false beliefs that I see. 3 will be more financial related, 3 will be more mental related. Let's get into it. There are some number of people watching this video that at some point wanted to retire, but as they got closer, a lot of the gusto for that goal simply wanes. I often hear people say that retirement is where a lot of people go just to wither away. Maybe you know somebody personally that seemed vibrant while working and then retired and that person lost purpose and lost their way. Or maybe you see a lot of depressing data like what I have on the screen that shows how the average person spends their day. The average full-time worker splits the majority of their day between work and sleep, and most other activities are simply sprinkled in. But as work is reduced, there is a straight line one can draw from work being reduced to more time spent in front of the TV. When people think about their dream retirement at various points through life, most people don't put sitting in front of their TV very high on their list. Yet a lot of data shows this is exactly what the average person does. Seeing this can force one to pause and maybe even rethink retirement. You may have a lot of energy and gusto for life while currently working, but if the average person just retires the TV, do you really want to give up that vibrancy for that? Well, let me make the same point, but on a tangential topic. Here is a breakdown of the average retirement savings in America by age. As you can see, before the age of 60, the median person in the population has less than $100,000 saved for retirement. So do you look at this chart and think, oh, the average person has a tough time saving and accumulating wealth, therefore I shouldn't even try? Most people don't have this conclusion, but that's effectively the same argument one makes when they look at other people's retirement or the average retirement and go, that's not for me. Yes, some people struggle in retirement, and retirement ends up being a disappointment. Others, however, do truly thrive and live their best life. Now, I think there are components that build great and bad retirements. We're going to talk about some of those later in this video, but it's a choice at the end of the day. It's not retirement that has the problem, it's the people in retirement. The fact that some people just wither away in retirement says nothing about what your retirement will be. Number 2, I see way too many people working longer than they need to just to get to 65, where they can join Medicare and healthcare decisions become a lot easier. They have the money to retire ahead of 65, but maybe can't stomach paying $2,000 per month for healthcare they may or may not even use. Know, however, that it's not a given that healthcare will be enormously expensive ahead of age 65. In some cases, yes, it can be. In other cases, however, you may be able to pay less for pre-Medicare health insurance than you eventually actually pay for Medicare. It all comes down to planning. Now, a retiree has a few options to choose from prior to Medicare, but we're going to focus on Affordable Care Act insurance for the sake of this discussion. Now, the amount that you pay on ACA insurance is directly tied to something called your reported income. The lower your reported income, the cheaper insurance will be. It's important to note your reported income, however, does not have to equal the income that you live on. Let's say you want to live on $100,000 in retirement. Now, if you pull that income from a combination of Social Security, pensions, and IRA withdrawals, then all of your income will be counted as reported income. And in terms of ACA insurance, you may not earn any healthcare subsidy. With no subsidy, you might be paying insurance costs like the ones you see on the right-hand side of the screen. However, let's say you have the ability to withdraw from your taxable account and Roth accounts to supplement your income pre-Medicare. Well, Roth withdrawals don't count at all towards your reported income. Taxable account withdrawals will only be counted partially based on the capital gains generated. Given this, you could easily live on $100,000 worth of income, but report an income far lower, thus earning you a massive subsidy. With careful planning, this can easily lower healthcare costs by tens of thousands per year, making healthcare costs a rounding error in the grand scheme. So don't let fears prevent you from retiring if you have the funds to do so. Again, you don't need more money at that point. You just need a better plan. Number 3, I find there is a large group of retirees that feel they can only retire when they have enough wealth where they can retire without touching their principal, just living on dividends and interest. Now, this stance can make a bit more sense if you want to leave as much money as possible to the next generation. But I find this idea extends just beyond those with big estate goals. Often people who don't want to leave a bunch for the next generation still believe it's most prudent to live just off the growth, and I believe this is a massive false belief holding back too many retirees. There are 2 reasons I find people in this camp. The first, living off just the growth, dividends, or interest feels a lot safer. And it is. Do you know what else would be a lot safer for your retirement? Working right up until the day you pass away. Obviously, that's an extreme, but I would make a case so is working long enough so that you can live just off interest and dividends. You saved up money for this goal of retirement. It would appear to me that it's a bad use of resources not to fully utilize those resources in that goal. Keep in mind, no one does this on a micro basis. If you are buying your first home, you don't purchase that first home when just the interest on your investments can afford it. You buy that needed resource when you are financially able to. Why would you think about retirement any differently? The second reason I find people in this camp is because people are used to progress. Seeing your first $100,000 on a statement, then years later, first $200,000, then years later, first $1,000,000, and so on, is exhilarating. You are making progress. It's very difficult to reverse this psychology and see the number on that statement start to go the other way. So rather than taking the time and changing your psychology to focus on becoming more comfortable with drawing down your assets, many instead plan to work years longer. And I think that's a bad trade. From a more data-driven context, understand that just living off your interest and dividends leads to worse outcomes. Take something like dividends. Historical dividend yields have been much higher than they are today for a multitude of reasons. For the better part of the last century, you could expect a dividend yield from your assets in the 5 or even 6% range. If you are just living off dividends, that means you need a lot less historically than you would need today to meet those same goals. Why? Because since the 80s, dividend yields have fallen here in the US. This isn't a bad thing. From 1925 to 1981, the S&P 500 averaged 9.5% with 22% volatility. Since 1981, corresponding with yields dropping, the stock market has averaged 11.5% with 16% volatility. Now, I'm not projecting and saying this is all due to dividends falling, just making the point that dividend yield is irrelevant to retirement success and therefore shouldn't matter in determining when you retire. In fact, searching for higher dividend yields today means you end up with a more concentrated, less diversified portfolio in real estate, international, and more value-oriented stock. The same can be said on the bond and interest front. With lower than historical yields, investors that want to live just on interest are forced to do one of two things: accumulate more wealth so the interest covers their need, or invest in riskier fixed income with higher yields. Both are not helpful in optimizing retirement. And so the takeaway here is spending down your portfolio isn't bad. You shouldn't feel bad for having this goal. In fact, if you don't have an estate planning goal as one of your primary goals, drawing down your assets is the most rational plan and can allow you to retire much sooner. Number 4, in recent years, I've noticed inflation becoming a much bigger fear in many retirees' minds. This is understandable, as inflation has been higher than normal this decade, and the media seems to only pour gas on this fire. Because of this, I see a group of people delaying retirement just to make sure they have a bit more money to hedge against this potential issue. However, there are some reasons why higher inflation may not be as big of a concern to retirees as one might think. First, many people assume they will need to spend the same each year in retirement, simply adjusted for inflation. However, retirement data shows a different trend. Across all household spending deciles, retirement spending drops as you age. This is often referred to as the retirement spending smile, as spending initially drops, but then can rise back up later in life as healthcare and housing rise due to things like long-term care. This makes sense if we stand back and think about it. You are most able during your first decade of retirement, and therefore discretionary spending is the highest. As you age, you simply do less, which correlates with spending less. Well, this downward trend in spending is a built-in inflation hedge to some degree. In addition, the asset mix that funds your income here matters. Many assets like fixed income and stocks in the short term are directly hurt by inflation. Social Security, however, is set to keep up with inflation. Stocks over the long term do a great job as an inflation hedge. To tie some data to this, real spending declines after age 65 by 1.7 to 2.4%, depending on marital status, according to Rand Corp. Say you are living on a $100,000 income initially in retirement. Social Security is, let's say, making up half of that. Well, even if we see higher than average inflation at 5%, through the reduction in your spending and Social Security's inflation adjustments, you come pretty close to keeping up with inflation just from Social Security adjustments. Many are familiar with the 4% rule as a safe withdrawal rate. The 4% rule is based on assuming static spending throughout your retirement. If you follow something closer to the retirement spending smile, you are able to live on approximately 17% more income. This is not to say inflation shouldn't be a concern for retirees, or you shouldn't try to combat it inside your retirement plan. but it's often a smaller concern than investors of other ages. Number 5, I'm nervous I won't have a purpose without work. I see a lot of pre-retirees get caught into analysis paralysis loop because they don't feel like they have a purpose or identity outside of work. And I think this is completely normal as a general feeling. Retirement is not just a financial event, but a massive life event. It will take some time to get used to. But at the same time, I think this idea of finding some grand purpose or calling that will invigorate you beyond belief is an overblown standard to set. Purpose viewed in this context seems like an external thing that you have to go out and find. In my opinion, that's not at all how purpose actually works. Finding a purpose starts internally, not externally. Something has purpose in your life because you place purpose into it. If you're not yet retired, let's first start with your current job and life. Does your current job give you some grand purpose? If the answer is no, well, great. You're not missing out on any purpose where you are currently. At the very least, retirement won't be any different. If the answer is yes, however, why is your job purposeful? Most people will list out things that I think are secondary reasons. For instance, you might love your team and the people you work with that bring you joy on a day-to-day basis. Or maybe your job brought you purpose because it put food on your family's table and helped get your kids through college. Those are both great, but are byproducts of the job. The purpose is not actually the job in that context. So I think the first step of finding purpose in retirement is to be ruthlessly honest with yourself about the exact reason you are finding purpose now in your current job. Most of the time, you don't need to keep working 8 hours a day to feel that purpose. It can simply be duplicated in retirement. You love your team at work. Great. Community can be duplicated in retirement in a million different ways, from reconnecting with old friends and colleagues, being on a team related to your hobbies, taking a bigger responsibility in your community, and more. But let's go back to this idea that purpose is found where you place it. Say over the years, you've let your health take a back seat, and now as part of retirement, you are thinking about placing health at the forefront of your goals, your purpose, but maybe it seems selfish or even stupid to say, my health is my new purpose in retirement. What's interesting is that when we watch pro sports and a Michael Jordan type athlete has a purpose of keeping their body in the best shape possible to win championships and build a legacy, everyone cheers on that purpose. It's a worthy pursuit. Well, you trying to keep your body in the best shape possible and that pro athlete trying to keep their body in the best shape possible are effectively doing the same thing, just at different levels. Their purpose is cheered on, while your purpose seems silly. Why is this the case? Your purpose doesn't need to be for anyone else, and you don't need anyone else's approval. It can be a super small purpose that just is meaningful to you and only affects you individually, or it could be some big grand purpose that affects hundreds of others. It doesn't matter. What speaks to you, and where are you going to place your values in retirement? Because ultimately, that's where purpose is found, where you place it. Then finally, I find way too many retirees endlessly delay retirement because they don't have certain answers to all of life's what ifs. A very common way to analyze the strength in a retirement plan is to run something called a probability of success calculation. Now, I have a video right here as to why I don't like these type of retirement plans, but nonetheless, let's use this type of plan to make a point. So let's say we simulate retirement 1,000 times and 92% of your simulations were successful. This is a great score. And on top of this, most retirees I meet are quite conservative in their initial assumptions. For instance, in putting together a retirement budget to get to this probability success score, they maybe rounded up each category, or they need $90,000 a year to cover their retirement goals, but they want their plan run at their dream retirement goal, which might mean they need $105,000. Sometimes they use slightly lower than average market returns here as well to add a bit more conservatism. Again, this is my experience with how most people want to start planning for retirement. Great. Let's say they sit at a 92% probability of success given all of this. They are happy, but then they go to bed and that night randomly wake up and find themselves asking, okay, but what if Social Security is cut? What if returns are even lower and inflation is even higher? What if the stock market crashes immediately and taxes rise 10%? All of these can no doubt happen, right? So then we start to stress test the plan and find that, oh wow, a Social Security cut would drop that probability of success by 7%. Oh, and taxes rising drops by 8%. And then you think, oh my gosh, I can't afford to retire right now with all of this uncertainty. What you end up doing is you start with conservative assumptions. Then you stack on worse and worse assumptions on top of that, which will force more and more conservatism. By the time we sit back and we zoom out, we realize the plan assumptions we created look nothing close to the real world. It's just bad event after bad events. And although this might seem like some prudent planning, you're being ultra conservative, it's not. Our goal with planning is to replicate the real world as close as possible. Just because something could happen doesn't mean it's expected to happen. Now, to some, overly conservative planning seems like it only has upsides. This is wrong. How do you develop a realistic tax plan if you think stocks are going to average 4% despite historically averaging 10%? Or what if you assume taxes are going to rise early in retirement? That will affect the tax plan in a big way. Now, I think stress testing is important. It's good to tie some data-driven answers to some of your what-ifs to give you some peace of mind. But don't adopt those stress tests as a representation of your overall plan health, because most of those stress tests will never be felt. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of today's video and if you have anything to add. If you like this video, you're going to love this video where we talk about 5 categories in retirement you should aggressively spend money on. Click here to learn more, and always remember, you don't need more money, you need a better plan. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.